not only think about attacking, but think about how you can defend in the industry. The more you know about attacking, hacking, the better you are at defense, at defending the networks. If you don't know how to hack, it's really hard to anticipate what the hacker is going to do.
Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Yaniv Hoffman, and every single day I get questions, email comments asking about the roadmap to becoming a hacker. What skills should you learn? What books should you read? What courses should you take? And as we kick 2025, I thought there is no better way to start the year than tackling this question head on. And who is better to help than a real hacker? So I'm thrilled to have Master Hacker Occupy the Web with us in a special 3-part video from beginner stage to intermediate to advanced. We'll speak about the foundation required, the skills, the tools, and much more. So with that said, without further ado, welcome Occupy the Web.
Thank you, Yaniv. It's always an honor to be asked to appear on your show. So thank you once again.
Great to have you here and looking forward to hear about your thought, and many of the viewers are looking forward to it as well.
Okay, well, let's get started then. I get the question as well often through email and on Twitter, X, and through YouTube. Is how do I get started in a career in cybersecurity or hacking? So there's at least two sides of cybersecurity. There's the attackers, okay, and there's the defenders. And so at Hackers Arise, we train both the attackers and the defenders. Now, there's a lot of people who enter into the field who don't recognize that most of the jobs are on the defensive side. So companies are willing to pay a lot of money to have their assets, their networks protected. So I would just want to kind of keep that in mind of the listener here, that most of the jobs are going to be on the defensive side. Yes, I love hacking, I love attacking, but if you're looking for some type of job security, then the defensive side is going to give you probably a lot more job security, especially when you're first starting out, because companies need somebody to protect their networks. And so keep that in mind when you're doing your studies, that not only think about attacking, but think about how you can defend. And I will make the case that the more you know about hacking, right? That's what hacking is, an attack. The better you are at defense, at defending the networks. I know a lot of people in the industry who are defenders, and they're high-paid defenders, right? That really don't know how to hack. And so if you don't know how to hack, it's really hard to anticipate what the hacker is going to do. So the more you know about hacking, the better you can anticipate and look for the telltale signs that somebody's compromising or attacking your system. And so that's why I encourage even those people who want to go into defense, right? People oftentimes use the term red team, blue team, right? I don't know. I don't like those terms, but so I talk about offense and I talk about defense. And so just like you would talk about in a military context or in a sports context, you talk about offense and defense. So let's start talking about what everybody needs to know in cybersecurity. And that's the first place to start. And that is Linux. and if you don't know Linux, you can probably get by on just Windows systems, but there's so many applications and so much capability that comes by becoming cognizant, conversant in Linux. So know how to use it. That's why I wrote Linux Basics for Hackers, was because I saw so many people in the field who were really talented people, but they couldn't do a lot of things that we wanted to do because they didn't know some basic Linux. So that's how Linux Basics for Hackers came about. So learn your Linux, okay? Know at least the basics. Understand the things that I put in that book as a minimum. That book is small. It's only 200 pages or so, right? And we purposely designed it that way. You can buy Linux books that are 1,000 pages or 800 pages, and they'll have everything about Linux that you might ever want to know. But most people will put those books up on the shelf and just use them as reference on occasion, and nobody actually reads the entire book. We designed Linux Basics for Hackers to be read from cover to cover, do the exercises, and become familiar. So that's step number one, right? And of course, you can't really do anything in cybersecurity without understanding networks. So you got to know how networks work. You got to know how things connect. And that is why I wrote Network Basics for Hackers. You don't have to read those books to be able to understand those things. But that was the whole purpose of writing those two books, was to bring people who are just starting out up to speed on the two most fundamental skills that you need to have to actually function well and prosper within the industry. You can get into the industry and not necessarily prosper. One of the things that you'll see if you're out there working in cybersecurity, you'll see there's a lot of people in cybersecurity who don't know Linux, but it's the Linux guy that everybody turns to when there's a problem, right? Because nobody else knows Linux, but oh yeah, that guy over there, he knows Linux. And obviously they become very important and very valuable to the organization, because if you're the only one who knows Linux, and so many of these devices are running Linux, then you're going to be indispensable, right? And Linux is not hard. A lot of people think that it's difficult. They come from Mac OS or a Windows environment. It really is not that difficult. Spend some time with my book or another book and get familiar with it, and you'll be happy you did, right? All right, next on my list, and I've got a long list here. Next time.
I think it's important. We in the last video we spoke about the books we recommend, right, for anyone to jump in, and we said base of the triangle is operating system, as you mentioned. Of course, it's important to know Windows, but Linux is key for everything, and networking is foundation.
Network is foundational. Yes, got to know networks, and if you're a attacker, you need to be able to connect to systems that you're attacking, and knowing how networks work is going to help you with that, as well as by understanding the various protocols that are used. Then you can better attack those protocols. And of course, if you're defending them, you need to understand how those protocols work so you can defend them better. All right, so that's kind of foundational stuff right there. As a beginner in the field, I think it's important to also become familiar with some of the virtualization software. The things like VMware, all right, the things like VirtualBox. These can be really useful in setting up a practice environment where you can set up some vulnerable machines and practice hacking them. You can have multiple machines that you can work with. It's not going to cost you. Without a VM, right, you're probably going to have your own network, at home or in a lab, which is going to be really expensive. But with virtual machines, you can have a whole network on one physical machine and practice your techniques and get to be familiar with these things without putting yourself at risk that you're going to break somebody's law and have law enforcement breaking down your door in the middle of the night to grab your computer. We don't want that. No. All right. One of the most essential tools, we'll talk about a couple essential tools that in cybersecurity, and one of them is NMAP. All right? NMAP is going to show you what is open on your systems, on your network, all right, to help you better protect your network. And of course, the attacker uses it for the same purpose, to find what is out there on the target system that they can hack into. So NMAP's a key tool, right?
And we did a video about it. I will leave it in the description and on the screen, so everyone that want to learn more about NMAP can watch. And I agree, reconnaissance is the basic.
Reconnaissance is key, right? So if you don't know what you're attacking, then your chances of being successful are pretty slim. You got to know what you're attacking, and reconnaissance is key. And so I would also say, to get started, that the newbie, the person who's just starting out, should become familiar with Wireshark. Wireshark is a tool, it's a sniffer, and some people call it a protocol analyzer, but basically what it is it's a tool that allows you to see every packet as it goes across the wire, right? And it can dissect every packet. So you can see everything that's going across the wire and what's in that packet, what the settings are, what's in the headers, and then with that information, make some determination whether or not somebody's attacking you, or whether or not there's something that's misfiring on your network. So Wireshark was first developed by network engineers to be able to determine why they were having problems on their network, right? So whether you're a network engineer, security engineer, or hacker, I think Wireshark is one of those tools you need to be familiar with. All right. Moving on, more things that we need as a foundation to get into cybersecurity. I would put on this list cryptography. So cryptography is just this idea of being able to secure our information, to make it confidential. So you don't need to be a cryptographer, right? But what you need to do is to understand how cryptography is used in cybersecurity, right? And so we need to understand things like hashes, symmetric cryptography, asymmetric cryptography, and understand how they're used. You don't need to become a cryptographer, because you're not going to become a cryptographer, by studying one class or a couple of tutorials, right? That's something that takes years and oftentimes a PhD. But you do need to understand how those things work and how you can use them to protect your network, or how you can use them to extract information as an attacker, right? So, for instance, password cracking. Password cracking requires that you understand a little bit about cryptography, right? And so you're not going to be able to crack a password unless you understand a little bit about it, and you're not going to be able to protect your network unless you understand a little bit about cryptography. So I'd put that on the list as foundational skills, right? Foundational. Okay, so once we got that foundation built, right? So we know those things, we got that good foundation. I would say that the new person, the person who's new to cybersecurity, should probably begin to understand and do a little bit of password cracking, right? Password cracking, and there's a lot of very sophisticated ways of getting into systems, right? Like one of the things we know right now is that the Chinese attackers are inside the U.S. telecom system, right? This is happening right now as we're recording this. They're inside there, and they've been there for months, and they are intercepting calls and text messages, and they can't get them out. So that's the other part here. So that's a really sophisticated attack. They're using an SS7 attack, which is a flaw in the cell system. But, right, that's something that maybe later on, when you get a little more advanced, you can approach, those types of attacks. Oftentimes, the simplest way to get into a system is to crack passwords, right? And so if you know a little bit about cracking passwords, you know where to get passwords at, then it can be a really important skill, both as a defender, right? So I know a lot of defenders who go through and they try to crack all of their employees or network engineers' passwords. That's just an annual practice, is to go in and see if you can crack your colleagues' passwords quickly. I mean, you can crack any password given enough horsepower. You can crack any password, you can brute force it. But really the question is, can I crack it quickly? Meaning a few hours, right? We're talking about a few years, that's probably a secure password. So that's one of the things I'd like to see people do, is learn a little bit of password cracking, right? How that works. Got to understand a little cryptography. Also on this score, I'd like to see people understand the burp suite. Okay, the burp suite is a proxy that allows you to take and capture the requests and responses between your browser and the destination, the server. Right? And by doing that, you can better understand what's going on in the communication between your browser and the server. And it also allows you to manipulate that request. Right? You can actually change it so that you can make that request into something that's malicious or gets information that wouldn't necessarily be available to you otherwise. So Burp Suite's on that list. It's got a free version in Kali, and it works pretty good in the free version. There's some small differences between the paid version, but for most people, the free version is going to work fine. I think the paid version is about $400 a year or something like that. And so starting out, don't go ahead and buy the paid version. Okay. Then I'd like to see people go ahead and master some basic Python. All right. Master some basic Python. Python is the language of cybersecurity. And there's a lot of other scripting languages out there, and there's a lot of other compiled languages out there. But if you're going to be writing exploits, attacks, right, just trying to automate the everyday things that you do, knowing Python is going to be really useful. And probably if you go into, say, Kali or any of the other cybersecurity operating systems, and you just search for how many of those tools end in PY. PY is the Python, the suffix, okay, that goes on the end of a Python script. You're going to see that most of your tools are built in Python. Some are built in other languages. I'm seeing more and more tools being built in the Go language. And so, but it's still a minority. So if I were to recommend to somebody, I would say learn Python first. And like any programming languages, scripting languages, once you know one language, it's easier to be able to adopt, okay, and master another language because you kind of know the concepts, right? And so that's what I would recommend. And then after you're done with Python, if you still want to learn more, go to Go language. Go is the language that was developed by Google. That's how it's Go. Some people refer to it as Golang or Go language. It's Google's language. All right. One of the things that I think that a lot of people starting out in cybersecurity ignore is social engineering. All right. Social engineering is a huge part of what happens in cybersecurity. Huge part. About 80% of all hacks, successful hacks, have a social engineering element behind it. Even the most famous hacks in history, the great ones that, the intelligence communities use against each other, almost always an element. There are very few attacks that do not have a social engineering element. To be good at social engineering, you have to understand how humans think and what motivates them. And it's not just simple, click here and, the Nigerian prince is going to send you $20 million, right? I mean, you still see those around, but a lot of the social engineering now is a lot more sophisticated, and where you'll have the attacker spend a lot of time trying to understand who you are what motivates you, and maybe even open a relationship with you, right? So you'll see this more and more where the attacker will try to establish it, and they won't attack you immediately. They're trying to get to know you and trying to build trust, right? So once they've built trust, then you're maybe going to click on a link or open a document, right? If those other attacks will work against, your 80-year-old grandmother, right? But within our industry, people still get social engineered, but it takes a little bit more work, right? So this is a really important part that's often overlooked because, people want to go, oh, it's not technical. Well, human psychology is technical. Understanding what motivates people is technical. It may not be IT technical, but it's definitely a technical skill. And most of the cybersecurity companies who do penetration testing, many of them have somebody on staff who simply specializes in social engineering, right? Because they want to test to see how resilient their staff is against these types of attacks, right? There's a lot of tools that are available to the user at this intermediate level. And so the number of tools is really probably too long to actually talk about all of them, but I think they would be useful to be able to maybe spend some time with Metasploit as well. Metasploit has a bunch of tools built into it. They call it a framework, but what it is that it's just a bunch of tools all put together with a similar interface. And that interface that Metasploit has is being copied by other frameworks now. We see other frameworks who are trying to use that similar type of approach of putting all the tools into one package and then asking you for an IP address to attack, what port, what module, what have you. So getting familiar with that tool is useful. It has a lot of exploits, it has scanning tools, it has a lot of other things in it. So that's where I would kind of start if you're just starting out in cybersecurity and attacking systems. It'll teach you how these systems work, and then you can advance to developing your own exploits, right? And this will show you other older exploits, how they work, right? Okay, let's talk a little bit more about some more advanced skill set. All right. I think that, if we're talking about advanced skill sets, we're talking about building your own exploits. That's kind of the top of the mountain, is being able to build your own exploits. And people who can do it get compensated very, very well. All right. There's, obviously there are the cyber criminals who do this, and they make some money, but there's also legitimate organizations, there's legitimate companies, right, in the US, in Israel, in France, in the UK, in Germany, simply develop exploits and then sell them to governments, right? And the NSO in Israel is one of those organizations that is behind Pegasus and a number of other cell phone. These are legal hackers. They get inside of the devices and figure out how to hack them and then sell that information to the governments, and they do very, very well, right? So exploit development is kind of the top of the heap. Along the way, I would recommend that people get familiar with a tool like Ghidra. We just did a tutorial on Ghidra. Why Ghidra? Well, first of all, it's a very good tool. 2, it's free, right? And 3, by disassembling malware, you can understand how it works, right? So you can get inside a piece of malware and see how it works. And then once you understand how it works, then that's going to, one, as a defender, it's going to make it easier or better understand how to defend against it. If you're an attacker, it's going to help you to be able to build your own exploits or take a piece of malware that's already out there, that's already been successful, and then maybe make some changes to it, right? Tweak it a little bit to make it more effective, or get past AV, to get past all of the next generation firewalls and IDSs and all the devices that are on our perimeter trying to protect us, right? So that's a tool that I really suggest that everybody become familiar with. And just the idea of disassembling software is a very valuable, high-level skill. It'll make you very employable if you're very good at it. All right. And then I want to talk about IoT, the Internet of Things. I think the Internet of Things is kind of like the leading edge of cybersecurity right now. One, because there's so many of these devices that are out there. I mean, there's billions. There are billions. I think the latest number is, I don't know, I think the latest number was like 20 billion of these devices. Right? There's only 7.5 billion people on the planet, but there's many more of these devices than there are people. So in the first world, people will have, things connected to their Bluetooth, to their home, to their garage, to their car. All of these devices are IoT. They're baby monitors, they're security systems. We could just keep on going through a really, really long list. Becoming familiar with these devices, which in almost all cases, all of these devices run on Linux. Right? Almost all of these devices run. Why Linux? Because Linux can be, one, Linux is free. Two, Linux can be made very, very tiny and be put into a very, very tiny $50 item and be sold, right? You can't put Windows in it because Windows is too big and it will cost you more than $50 to put it in there, the licensing fees from Microsoft or any other operating system. So almost all of these devices are run on Linux, which takes us back to where we started from, is that you should know Linux. And that's going to benefit you when you get to the high end here and these IoT devices that are being hacked all the time right now. And they're being hacked for a number of reasons. In some cases, they're being used for DDoS attacks. That's probably the most popular thing they're being used for. They're also used as a password cracking. So if I have a million IoT devices, I can use all of them, okay, to be able to crack passwords. Right? The more machines I have, the faster I can crack passwords. And then sometimes the IoT device is simply an entry point to the network. All right, so the IoT device, if it's on, say, a home security system and it's connected to the Wi-Fi, if I can hack the IoT device, I can potentially get inside of your home network, right? So, or the company network, whatever. But if there's, a lot of the industrial scale systems, what we call SCADA or ICS, industrial control systems, they often are so big that they can't use wires. So everything is wireless. They're all connected by wireless protocols. And if you can hack these protocols or these devices, whether it be a sensor or an actuator, they're oftentimes communicating via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. If you can get inside of them, then you potentially can take over the entire system, right? And then, this is my final recommendation. we can't end a recommendation on how to get started in cybersecurity without talking about artificial intelligence, right? Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. You can't have a conversation in 2024 or 2025 about anything in cybersecurity or anything that's IT related without talking about artificial intelligence. And one of the things that people ask me a lot is, well, am I wasting my time, becoming a cybersecurity engineer when artificial intelligence is going to take all of our jobs? And I could be honest here and say that it's probably going to take some people's jobs. Yeah, there's probably some people who are going to lose their job to artificial intelligence, but don't make it your job, right? You are the one who can control your future. You should become familiar with artificial intelligence and learn how to use it for your benefit, to make you better at what you do, right, than if you weren't using it. And sometimes being better at what you do is maybe making better decisions or maybe doing things faster. Remember that your employer is paying you by the week, the month, the year, whatever they're paying you by the hour. And so the more that you can get done in that hour, week, month, year, the more valuable you become. And that's where artificial intelligence can help you, right? Is to get more done quicker. So for instance, if you're given a job and you have to write a particular Python script, right, to do a particular job, you could sit down and write the script from scratch, right? And it'll take you a little while, depending on how fast you type and how fast you think. But you can go to one of the better artificial intelligence and tell it to write the script for you. Now, very often that script will have bugs in it, okay? And you will have to debug the script. But that's a lot faster than writing it from scratch. So you tell the artificial intelligence, I want this script, it'll crank it out in a couple of seconds, and then you have to run it and see what works and what doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't have the features that you want. You might have to add another function or module to it, but it saves you a lot of time, which makes you more valuable to your employer. It makes you better at what you do. If you are afraid of AI, then it's your job that's going to get lost. You're the one who's going to be unemployed unless you embrace it and make it work for you, right? Because it can enhance your capabilities quite a bit. It can't necessarily replace you, but it can make you much better at what you do, which means that your firm, instead of needing 20 cybersecurity engineers, they might only need 10. But the 10 that are going to keep their jobs are the ones who can use AI to make themselves better at what they do. And along that line, I just want to throw in one more idea, is that there is this whole field of data science that is becoming quickly into use within cybersecurity. So this is the idea of being able to gather very, very large data sets, and make some sense out of those data sets. So this is what we're, many of the companies and individual firms are doing this as a form of cyber threat intelligence. I want to know what's out there, okay? And one of the things I can do is gather all that information. That's the first step. But then you got to make sense of it. And that's where the data science analytics come into play. We have a course, one of the few places where you can take a data science analytics course is at Hackers Arise in January. At the end of January, we have it scheduled. And so we've added it to our program because we think it's really important. We think it's going to make people better at what they do, and it's going to be a skill that's going to be in high demand and high pay. So I think that kind of wraps up what I had to say. I tried to take it from the very foundational up to the more advanced, and I hope we've created some kind of blueprint or roadmap of what the beginner in this industry can expect and should try to master along the way. Don't try to do it all at once, right? Take it piece by piece. Try to do a little bit every day, right? Try to make it a practice to spend some time every day learning something new. Something new. Don't try to master Linux all at once, but try to play with it. That's the term that I use. I'm going to play with it every day. And if you do it every day, it's going to become second nature. and do some of the exercises in my book or other things that you have that need to be done in Linux. And you'll eventually become really comfortable. So, I think most people will go, oh my gosh, this is so much easier than using Windows or Mac.
I think it's a great advice, take step by step. And in one of your books, if I'm not wrong, you wrote that hacking is the most important skill of the 21st century, right?
I did say that, and I still say that, and I believe it sincerely. I wrote it in my very first book, Linux Basics for Hackers, and I've said it many times since. The reason is that everything in our world is becoming digital, right? And so that means that the more things become digital, the more attack surfaces there become, the more that there's risks that are based upon these digital devices. It also plays a role, as we now are pretty clear on, that it plays a role in geopolitics and cyber war. So the nations that have the best hackers are going to be the most powerful. It used to be those people who had the biggest tanks and the biggest guns. But now it's the people who have the best hackers are the most powerful. And that becomes really clear when you start getting into cyber war, and countries are knocking out each other's infrastructure, their banking system, their water systems. Now, if you can knock those out of your opponent, it's going to be hard for them to conduct war. So that's becoming more and more important. And of course, hacking in terms of espionage is being able to know what your opposition is saying and doing. So things like Pegasus has been used to spy on people and listen to their conversations and their text messages. And that's why Pegasus is so popular and so valuable. It's also a big infringement upon people's privacy rights, but that's a whole other question.
So OTW, thanks so much. I think you covered very nicely from the beginner level to the intermediate to the advanced level. Definitely many of the foundation skills, tools that need to be learned, and great advices. Take it step by step. Don't try to cover it all in once. It's much more challenging, and you can lose also focus and lose the expertise. And with that said, I think, guys, if you have more tools you think should be part of this path of cybersecurity hacking, please let us know. Leave your comment in the description. Definitely, there are many more subjects about maybe certifications, what exact course you should take, but we have limited time in this video. But if you want to hear more about it, again, leave your comments in the description. If you're not a subscriber, please do so. It only will take a second. Click the like button if you like the video, if you saw it insightful. Leave your comments, it will help us a lot. And OTW will continue to do more and more videos together to try to educate for better cybersecurity awareness and practices. Thank you very much.
Happy New Year, everyone. I'm hoping that 2025 is a good year for you, a prosperous year for you. And if you're looking to enter cybersecurity, I'm hoping that you get your first job in 2025.
Definitely. And Happy New Year for everyone, including you, OTW, and thank you very much again.